to the InnerVerse. It's an illusion.
Welcome to the One Within All to the InnerVerse podcast. I'm your host, serving up another hearty helping of gnosis gained through exploration of the unknown. One of my favorite taglines to describe this podcast over the years has been prying open your third ear, a fun pun to indicate the heart-expanding nature of our vibe here and to illuminate the importance of being attentive to our inner voice. Of course, you can't spell heart without hear, and you can't spell hear without ear. And given that the foundational essence of our cosmos is sound and vibration, it's no wonder that Earth itself is an anagram for heart. That most amazing of intelligent organs that never ceases its life-giving rhythm from the beginning of an incarnation to its end. We hear a lot about the metaphysics and energetics of internal organs like the heart, but in all my years of holistic health investigation, I've encountered next to no information about the significance of the ear, despite the fact that it's probably the most obvious representation of the transcendental Fibonacci sequence observable on the body. If we're walking around with a couple of golden spirals on the sides of our head, it seems like that might be a clue that the ear does more than just listen, and that it's meant to be listened to as well. Here to guide us into the fascinating field of auricular science and its many related holistic health modalities is the auditory educator and healer of hearing, Dave Maybee. And as the director...
Brilliant. Amazing intro.
I've still got some more. As the director and lead instructor at the Canadian Institute of Auricular Medicine, Dave has played a pivotal part in pioneering this profound science by teaching the teachers, researching the energetics of the ear, and combining a huge array of therapies in his private clinical practice for well over a decade, pulling together diverse threads of knowledge such as traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, myofascial and cranial sacral massage, and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, just to name a few. Dave's astounding array of expertise areas are on offer today for our listening pleasure. And if you like what you hear, drop into the episode description wherever you're tuning in for links to the Canadian Institute of Auricular Medicine, where you can continue your education with seminars and studies that comprise a huge body of research. And don't forget to check the links for all the many ways you can support InnerVerse through Patreon memberships, biofield tuning sessions, and our epic affiliates like Tippecanoe Herbs and Lotus Way. So, my friends, it's time to get the metaphorical wax out of your ears and listen up. Because if you're like me, you've encountered very little knowledge about this subject despite years of studying the healing arts, and I, for one, can't wait to learn more. Everyone, please extend some gratitude into the ethers for the auricular oracle and pinup professor himself, Dave Maybee. Welcome to InnerVerse, man, and thanks for joining us today.
Wow, thank you, Chance. It's so wonderful to be here. And I love the amount of alliteration in that introduction. It's fantastic.
That's how you make it sound good. You're giving away my secrets, man.
Oh, it's wonderful. Thank you. So thanks for putting this podcast out there in the world, and it's a real gift. It's a real gift to the world, and I'm so honored to be part of it.
Oh, thank you for saying that, man. We got to give a shout out to our mutual friend Ishan for connecting us. He's just been a little butterfly of learning, popping around to all kinds of different healing arts and modalities. I love that dude, and great client as well. So, Dave, what about your early life led you to learn the mysteries of the ear? That's what I want to know first.
Yeah, well, I guess about 23 years ago or so, it was my mother actually who got into Auricular, and her partner, who was a medical doctor, dragged her to a conference. She didn't really want to go, but she dragged her to a conference, and there my mother found this amazing seminar, this amazing workshop on Auricular, and hadn't really spent much time thinking about it or being with that medicine. And she was just totally inspired to bring this medicine to Canada. And it was presented by a German doctor, Dr. Beate Strittmatter. And my mother is an adult educator by trade, so basically said, I need to bring this medicine, I need to bring this training to Canada. And then she ended up also becoming a practitioner of Auricular. And then she ended up starting a school. Now, I, at the time, was in my early 20s, and I didn't really know. I was kind of directionless at that point. But I had this affinity for what she was doing. I had this affinity to learn about how the body works. And so I had already self-studied anatomy and physiology just on my own time. And this idea that you could use such a small part of the body as a map of the entire system fascinated me. And so I started going to the seminars that my mother was putting on, because also it was free. I could just show up and didn't have to pay for going, which was nice in my 20s. And eventually I just went to enough of them that I started assisting her. And then eventually I started teaching the courses myself. And so just a few years ago, I've completely taken over the Institute from her in terms of instruction and direction, along with my wonderful partner in business, Duvan, who's been so amazing at the technical side of things. But really the inspiration just kind of naturally was fluid, and it was just something that became an opportunity in my field, and I just flowed right into that, and it felt very natural.
Cool, man. So it's kind of a family jam. I like that.
Totally.
So how far back do the origins of auricular medicine really stretch?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm not sure anyone has the true answer to that, but I'll say that there definitely are signs that ear acupuncture as such was used, even in the ages of the Neanderthal, very prehistoric times. They found some very early human remains, thousands of years old, that did have tattoos of points on the ear that they assumed were used over and over again for particular conditions. But
was that Otzi the Iceman?
I think his name was Otzi. But yeah, exactly. The Iceman who had these tattoos on his ear, that shows us that, okay, maybe there was some use of it, but the truth is that it wasn't really developed into a full medicine. And what I mean by that is it wasn't until Dr. Paul Nogier in the early 1950s started looking at the ear as a whole map of the body that we had access to auricular as a full practice. And so he developed it over about 20 years. And in 1972, he released his first publication that basically had a map of a baby basically in fetal position that matched the ear. And so now we had in the 70s this very complete picture of how the ear holds a map of the body. And so, yeah. So it would have been so really in that way, it's kind of new.
That's super amazing. There's lots of other I'm sure you're aware, parts of the body that have this fractality to the rest of our body. The hands, the soles of the feet, there's iridology, looking at someone's eyes. I bet there's people that can look into your mouth or your tongue and tell you stuff like that. But
definitely scalp acupuncture, abdomen. I would hazard a guess that there are many more areas of the body that are microsystems than we realize. It's just that we maybe haven't really like actually seen how it works. But I would say that probably there are lots of places that could serve as a microsystem. And the beautiful thing about the ear is that, in my mind, it's already designed like a map. Like you said before, it's not just for hearing. It's designed in this landscape topography kind of way that is perfectly set up to orient you just like a map is. So that's one reason why I'm drawn to it and I love it so much.
Yeah, that is a really cool thing. You know, just from an aesthetic point of view, you might think, man, the ears are like the weirdest looking part on the human body. But from a geometry standpoint, they're the most clear indication that we do grow out of this Fibonacci sequence pattern that reflects the golden mean transcendental that everything in the universe seems to spiral out of, which, like I was saying in the intro, that should be a clue that this is a very important part of our anatomy.
Definitely. And it's amazing that we didn't really, as we being humans, we didn't figure this out in a systematic way, until the 1970s, And so it's really quite a gift to the world, in my opinion, to have this ear map.
And it might be a rediscovery, it sounds like.
Yeah.
That's probably the case. I'm I don't really believe in the beginning personally. I think that we're on this cyclical, eternal existence. That's just my opinion. And
yeah, I love it.
That being the case, like, it's sort of as the Platonic philosophy states, all learning is really just remembering. I feel that that's something that's going on with these holistic health arts, that when I say holistic, I mean it truly in the sense of addressing the whole through the parts. And that my favorite catchphrase is probably everything is everything. And this is a really cool way to demonstrate that. So let's talk about maybe starting out in this concept, how the ear can be used as a diagnostic window for the internal body.
Yeah, absolutely. And, no matter what part of the body that you're wanting to look for, it's reflected on the ear. And I will also say that not just the physical body, but also points that reflect functional elements of the system. So, for example, there's anti-inflammatory and anti-pain points that have a function when they are stimulated that don't necessarily always reflect a physiological an anatomical structure or a physiological process that is what we know of as part of that world, of that very sort of closed idea of how the body works. There are also points, for example, for a lot of emotional processes. So there's a point, for example, that is for self-aggression. There's a point for distrust, for resentment, these kinds of things as well. And so every chakra has a point on the ear. All the meridians are mapped on the ear. The list goes on. So it's very holistic in the sense that you can really see the big picture of the whole body, but you can also see the big picture beyond the physical body of what's happening with the emotional world, and even into a realm that you could call spiritual. If you want to talk about the chakra systems, the energy body as that, you can really access all of these. Now, it can be as simple as taking a golf tee and poking around on the ear and seeing what's tender. Like, basically what I mean by that is, if you take a golf tee, I say golf tee because it's not pointy enough to pierce the skin, but it's still precise enough, and you can touch the ear relatively gently. And when you touch with the same pressure on a point that is active, otherwise known as, calling for help, the person who you're touching will feel that point as being much more sensitive. So even just something as simple as that, you can actually find several points on the ear that are calling out for help. And so even from that very simple process, you can start to get an idea of what is going on with the person. And it might not always be the pain that they're feeling right at that moment. It might be something that is maintaining that pain that they're not necessarily aware of, that is coming up on the ear. And so the ear can really provide you with a lot of information, not just about how to solve the problem that a person's complaining about, but also what's underneath that. And that's always what I'm after is I don't want to just, you come in with hip pain and I treat a hip point and we say goodbye. I want to see, why is this hip pain maintaining? What are the emotional and physiological elements of this that's maintaining it? And the ear can very quickly tell me the answers to those questions.
This is amazing. Sounds like everything in the kitchen sink can be accessed through the ear.
Absolutely.
This spiral nature of it, that does make sense to me. And I've got a lot of questions, but the first thing that maybe people are wanting to know is, that just popped into my head, is piercing your ears or gauging the ears, is that a potentially negative practice then?
That's a really common question and a really good one. And so there are different schools of thought on that. My personal opinion is that if you pierce your ear in a place where there's an active point, then in a way, I like to think about things, in a positive way. So in a way, you could potentially be treating yourself. However, you are creating scar tissue. But the thing is that if you pierce your ear and it heals well and there's no problem, then actually probably it won't really affect anything long term. If you put a metal in your ear, in that earring, that is gold or silver, there's a potential that it will continue to stimulate the points around that hole. And because gold has kind of a positive ionic charge, silver has kind of a negative ionic charge relatively. And so there's a potential that if there are active points around the hole that you've made, that metal could be continuously stimulating those points, which could be beneficial or could be a little bit stress adding to your system. Something like stainless steel is kind of more neutral in its ionic charge, so it wouldn't necessarily have that effect, or probably would be even better. But yeah, so those are just ideas that I have about how it could affect a person. But I don't worry about piercings too much. I just work around them.
Cool. That all makes sense, especially the metals part. I guess, not to belabor the subject, but is there a point that's right there in the center of the lobe where most people are getting their first or only piercing?
Yeah, it is. It's the eye point. So, and the right ear reflects the right side of the body if you're looking anatomically, and the left is the left side of the body. And so if you put a piercing right in the center of your lobe on the right, then it's going to be close to the eye point. So if somebody has eye issues and you get a piercing in the middle and then your eye issues clear up, that I'd love to hear about that. That would be an interesting story.
On that subject, so besides piercing, are there like at-home ways to stimulate these points easily? And
absolutely,
where would we maybe get the chart for that? I'm thinking, I talk for a living. Is there a way I could stimulate my throat chakra with my ear?
Absolutely. And I'm gonna, if it's okay, I might show a chart at some point as well. I have it open for that, and just to give a sense of it. And there are lots of ear charts around, but there are different versions of them. And there's a Chinese one, there's a German one, which is the one I work with. There are French charts. And so people have different ideas of where certain points are. But in the end, what you're looking for really is tenderness. And so in terms of just treating yourself at home, even if you don't know any points, you can just massage your ear with your fingers. And wherever you feel like it's quite sensitive, you can just give a little bit of a massage in that area, with your finger and your thumb, one side on the other, right? You can just give a little massage, and it's going to be a little bit tender, a little painful. And so you just kind of give it a massage for a minute or so, and you're giving yourself basically, a full body treatment when you do that. And you're able to see where the tender spots are. It would be nice also to know what you're treating. And so looking at a basic map of the anatomy is helpful in that. If you want to get even more specific, then a Gulf tee, of course, is much more precise. And then you can get to a throat point, because it's kind of like just above the ear canal. So it's a little bit trickier to get to, but you could get in there with your finger, like just like that. But it's a little bit hidden. So, but you'll notice probably if you put pressure on the upper part of your ear, above your ear canal, as far in as you can go without going inside your ear canal, that if you go around that area, you might feel like, oh, there's some tenderness there, especially if your throat is feeling a little bit scratchy, that kind of thing. And then if you do, then you can give it a little bit of a massage like this. When I got into this, I loved looking at people's ears, because you can tell a lot by looking at someone's ears. And there's particular areas, of course, where I know the map. Once you know the map, you're looking at people's ears and you say, oh, there's some red lines in the lung area. And their neck seems like it's been like out of place for a long time. And I used to go on public transit, and travel that way. And I used to catch myself looking at people's ears a lot. And I really had to catch myself, and just like, okay, no, I can't be just staring at people's ears, because people think that's kind of weird. But I was fascinated,
They didn't have like earmuffs on because it's so cold up there?
This would have been in the summer.
Okay. So there's more to it than just the tenderness question. It was so interesting that that's part of the picture, because I have at times in my life noticed like, wow, this part of my ear is really tender to the touch. And I never thought twice about it. I was like, it'll go away. It typically did. But now if I ever notice that, I'm going to listen to the message that it's sending. It's no different than our recent guest, Mark, who is the dental shaman, talking about how the meridians come out of different teeth, and that the teeth having problems in one spot could tell you about internal organs. It's so amazing that even though life doesn't come with a user manual for this incredible human body, the body itself is its own guide. That is so cool. Absolutely. So besides just the tenderness, there's maybe visible differentiations in parts of the ear. You mentioned like red lines. You're talking about like micro blood vessels that become visible. Things like that could be indicating something. That's
right. And so sometimes even like they branch, the blood vessels kind of look like a river with tributaries kind of going into one main line, and they're very tiny on the ear. But if you follow where that river goes, then you can even start to see that, oh, this problem over here is actually perhaps being maintained or sustained by this problem over here, because of the direction of the flow of the blood vessels that are visible. And a lot of times blood vessels aren't really very visible on our ears unless it's trying to show us a problem. So there is once you start to understand how to read the ear, understand how to listen to the ear, so to speak, there's really a wealth of information there that can really, as a practitioner, it can really lead me to some profound information very quickly. And it takes a lot of guesswork out of the picture, which is nice.
Well, before we get into maybe looking at some of these diagrams, which I think would be cool to do. So audio audience, you might want to consider jumping on YouTube or one of my other video platforms just to see what we're looking at, or check out Dave's information online and, do some Googling. You might find something useful. But before that, you mentioned this phrase, listen to the ear. And we've already covered off the visible spectrum, the touch spectrum for the ear. But are there any other sensory inputs? Like, can you actually listen to an ear, like a stethoscope? Are there other things that can be diagnostic tools here?
Well, not so much listening in that way, but my favorite way to assess the ear is actually using a pulse-guided assessment. And this brings us into kind of a new realm of assessment. And basically, what we're able to do is we're able to feel the pulse of the person we're treating and feel the amplitude of the pulse. And so it's about this big when you feel it, okay? Now we have many different tools, but you can even just use a pen and you can go over the ear without touching it. And when you're over top of a point that is active, without touching the ear, just hovering over, then the pulse will actually change. And so there's an amplitude change in the pulse. The pulse gets bigger when you're over an active point. And so this is a very sort of like basic way to use this, but you can also hover over the ear with a substance, and for example, a flower essence or a frequency from a laser. You can do a lot of things with this and get very specific information about what is going on in the system based on the ear. And so this is my favorite way to listen to the ear. To listen to the ear is using the pulse of the person, because it now you're entering into a world of subtlety that allows a much more profound view and a much more nuanced view of what's going on for that person. We call this the VAS, the VAS, which is the vascular autonomic signal. So really what we're listening to is a very subtle fight or flight response from the body. Not to the point where the person feels anxious, but one of the things that happens when we have a fight or flight response is that all of the blood vessels in our body all constrict at the same time. And it's a systemic process that happens immediately without any delay. And because that happens on a very, very subtle level, we can detect it in the pulse if we're paying attention. And as soon as there is an active point that we're passing over, then there's an electromagnetic resonance there. And that resonance creates that very temporary kind of fight or flight response in the system, because it's new information and there's a resonance there. And so feeling that in the pulse is really the best way to be accurate with this medicine.
That's awesome. I've actually heard of that before, especially from herbalist teachers that I speak to on here. That pulse monitoring thing, it's like the body's intelligence is alive and just waiting for us to figure out how to access it. They do that with herbs, like present an herb or pose a question. Is this the medicine that you want, or the substance that would be helpful, or things like that? And the body seems really capable of answering yes or no questions in a variety of ways. I do biofield tuning, and now this seems like a good time to bring it up to the ear guy, because there's kind of a mysterious thing that occurs for me that is not so typical. So most people that do biofield tuning using tuning forks to help move stuck energy in the auric field back to the center of the body, back to the chakra that it came from, to unstick frozen memory and life force and get it back into circulation. They typically are listening for variations in the pitch or the strength of the tone of the fork and things like that. And I do listen to those things and I get information from that. But what became my method, just kind of accidentally, is that whenever I put my fork or even just my hand into some stuck energy, or even, I've expanded this to just like, I'm looking for this thing. Is it here? Yes or no? I get these pops in my ear. There's this like pressure feeling kind of in my head, and my ears kind of click and pop. It's similar to when you're going up in elevation, like on a plane, but without the hearing loss or discomfort. And it's completely consistent and completely accurate. So it blows my mind still to this day, but I've been doing this for years now, and my head gives me the answer that I'm looking for consistently every time. Yeah. So I wonder, do you have any insight about that kind of, I don't know, magic ears, if we can call it that?
Well, it does sound like a pressure change. And I do think that, what I'm describing with the pulse changing based on an autonomic response happens not just in the person that I'm treating or testing. It happens also in me, because their electromagnetic field affects mine. And so I can actually feel my own pulse, and I'll get the same answer as if I'm feeling the person's pulse that I'm treating. And so what you're describing, is similar in a way to a lot of students that I've taught the vase to. They say, well, I can feel it in a different way. When I find a point, yes, I get a vase, yes, I get a pulse response, but I also feel something in my chest, or I feel something in my head, or I feel, or something shifts. And I say, well, that's wonderful. And it's consistent with when they feel the vase. And so what, my opinion about what that is they're just, it's like, these are different ways that that your nervous system as a practitioner is showing you that you're in the right place. And it could be just variations on an autonomic response, on that sympathetic, so fight or flight response on a very subtle level. And the person that you're treating is having that response because you've got some stuck energy there, and you enter that field. Well, there's resistance, right? And so you're entering that resistance, you're challenging that resistance. And so there's a part of the person's nervous system that it has a very subtle fight or flight response. Then that would, in turn, of course, without any delay in time, affect your own nervous system, right? And so it makes sense to me that you would have something like that happen. And I think it can be different for every practitioner.
I would
say go with it.
Yeah, just go with it, people. And I found out much after the fact that in human design, my energy center that is open, everything is defined except my head. So it would make sense that would be the point where I'm like modulating external information, but while it works remotely. I'm not even in the room with them. And I'm using a pretend body made of crystals and it still works just like that. So I think it's really amazing, the potential for interfacing with the intelligence of our body that is connected to the all that is and is not separate from anything and knows all that there is to know, at least that's real, yet maybe not like fictional information or conceptual human information as much, but definitely on the energetics level, there is no separation from here to there. Distance is a mental concept. It's pretty cool. You guys do remote stuff yourselves since maybe more so since the lockdowns?
Definitely. I've done remote. So I'll do mentoring with students sometimes, and they'll have a patient on the table. We'll be on a Zoom call, and they'll be going through and feeling the vase, and I'll be feeling my own vase watching on the video, and I'll be able to confirm for them, that yes, actually that was the vase, or a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, and then they feel it too. Yes, that's it. And so it's, I've done that quite a few times, and it's really very consistent. The first time I did it, I was surprised, even though I do believe that it's within the realm of possibility. I'd never actually tested the theory before. And the first time I did, it really was like a very beautiful landing, in that knowing of like, okay, this is a conceptualized thing that I had in my mind, but now I'm doing it and it's consistent and it's working. And then I was able to rest in the knowing that does work.
So cool. I feel like we're just at the precipice of some wildly magical stuff.
Yeah, we are.
So I liked, if possible, I like it when there's some take-home, do-it-yourself information in a podcast of this type. So maybe we can discuss stimulating some of the points on the ear, showing maybe some of where these points are. I think the most common stuff that people would deal with would be like pain or inflammation. And
Totally.
It would be great for, some personal practice to be upgraded for listeners out there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, so I can bring up a chart and give a quick little tour of a couple of the common places where people might want to look. So I just want to show, I'm not going to really spend a lot of time just doing a tutorial, don't worry. But I do want to show you the very basic kind of structure here. Okay. So here, like I said, is the eye, as I mentioned before, right in the middle of the lobe, right? Here we have all kinds of what we call pain memory points. So these are points that reflect painful traumas. And these are all in the limbic brain, the emotional brain, right? So here we have the jaw and the teeth. And you were talking about the teeth earlier from your guest last time. And that is something that we really focus on quite a lot, actually, in Auricular, is working with the teeth. So this area here is treated quite often, the teeth. And so this would be, if this was the right ear, these would be the right jaw and the right quadrants of the teeth. Yeah.
Can you zoom in just a little more?
Yeah.
Amazingly complex how
right?
much information is here.
Yeah, I know, it's a lot. And so some of it you can kind of throw out of your mind a little bit, but you see these are the teeth here. And this is the jaw, and there's a lot going on in the jaw. And you can see one of them is grief. One of them is an antidepressant point, right? One of them is a point that has to do with disappointment. One of them is tonsils and pharynx. And so there's a lot happening here, and we can differentiate in various ways using the VAS, especially the pulse assessment, which point we're finding out of these 4 or 5 points, which is kind of neat. And so if you go
that
up
answers
this way,
a question. I'm like, how do you narrow it down when there's so many all clustered together, but you get into the general area and then you start doing the VAS method?
Exactly. If you think it's the jaw, for example, if you think it's the jaw point you're finding, then you can also then take the pointer that you're using and go to the actual jaw joint on the body. And then if that resonates too, then you know that what you're finding here is the jaw joint, and maybe it's not the antidepressant point, for example. So you can be really specific with this. And so here we have the neck, for example, right? So it's going up this ridge. This is the neck, the shoulder. So if you have shoulder issues, you can find about this area, right about in the middle, right about across where this ridge starts in the middle. So right here is the shoulder area, elbow, the ribs. Okay, and then here's the sacrum and the lower back, the hips. And you'll see the hand, this is the hand. The hand itself actually takes up, about I won't say a quarter, but it's maybe a fifth of the whole ear. And that's not because the hand is big, that's because the nerves in the hand there are many more sensory nerves and motor nerves in the hand than a lot of other places in the body. So this is a reflection of how many nerves are actually in that area of the body, which is why the hand takes up this much space. And let's say like the shoulder to the elbow, that part of your arm is only this big because there aren't as many nerves there, right? And then the foot is over here, right? And you have all your internal organs on the inside of what we call the concha in here. Okay, so the lungs, the liver. So the throat point you were talking about, it would be up in here, in this area, on the inside. you know? Yeah. And so there's a lot going on here. And so something that you might want to think about treating for pain is the physical place where you're having the pain, of course. But then this area right here, this is called the thalamus. And this point right here, if you put one finger on this side of the ear and then the other finger on the inside to match it and squeeze this area and find a tender spot in this area, then that is a really great anti-pain point. Really great anti-pain point. This point here is interferon, which is basically an anti-inflammatory point, which is almost always active on people, honestly, this point right here. So it's not on the inside, it's right on the outside, and it's right where this ridge is here. You see? And so if you find a tender spot there, then that would be a good one to massage, to take down inflammation. And one of my favorites that I've used a lot is during allergy season. If you have a stuffy nose or something, this point right at the very top of the ear is the histamine point or the allergy point. And if you find a tender spot at the very top of your ear and you massage that, I've found, amazing results within seconds. Like my nose will be completely stuffed up and it's really hard to sleep. And I'll start massaging that point, and within 10 seconds, my nose is completely clear and I can sleep. It's kind of hard, even for me. I've been doing this for a long time, and even for me, it's hard to believe sometimes.
This is amazing, man.
Right? It really is quite an incredible thing. And the last thing I want to show is just some of these emotional points that I was talking about before. So, for example, here you have a point of distrust. Now these are translated from German, and so I translate, hysteria, for example, I translated to emotional overwhelm, to be a little bit more gender neutral. And that one, historically, it's been used for women only. So I like to say emotional overwhelm for that one.
So it's like not on the ear per se, but just
right
that far away.
They're off the ear. And so you can think of like this line right here is about where the hairline would be. Generally, if a man has a beard, this is about where the hairline would start on a beard generally. So that gives you a sense. It's maybe half an inch from the end of where the ear is to this point, something like that. Yeah, and so you have all kinds of points. Here's, for example, the self-aggression point that I was talking about. There's a point for love and hate, and these can sometimes just be indicator points of what's happening, what emotion is behind something. And then you have something like a nicotine point. So this point is really fascinating because when you treat this nicotine point, what happens is you're stimulating the part of the brain that is satiated by nicotine, and so you're actually telling the brain that it's had nicotine and that it can calm down. And so if somebody
that works,
it works really well. It's amazing. And so only if it's active, but it will only be active if somebody's craving nicotine at the time, you see. And so if somebody smokes a cigarette or has a vape or whatever, intakes nicotine just before coming in, this point won't be there. It won't be active at all because that part of their brain is satiated, right? And so anyway, so it's a dynamic map also, right? So these points are only going to be active if and when they have they represent some activity in the nervous system. And so that's why it provides this beautiful dynamic map of what's happening right now with this person, right? Very individual. So
very cool. And then on the other side there, it's like the side profile of the ear, I take it.
Yeah, The back of the ear, exactly. And so here on the back of the ear, you have the motor nerves, which means the muscle, the movement, basically. So if someone has pain in their shoulder, you treat the shoulder point on the front. If someone has frozen shoulder and it's not moving, then you'd look for the shoulder point on the back. So exactly on the back of the ear, from here, you have the shoulder point, which is here on the back. And this would free up the muscles of the shoulder, whereas the shoulder point on the front is more for pain. And here we have, for example, the colon, right? So people who have constipation, for example, you would treat points along the colon that would help to free that up, so that kind of thing, right? So there's really a point for pretty much everything.
This is amazing. Well, we'll bring down the chart for now.
Yep.
But sure people will be screenshotting that and investigating for quite a while. I was interested to notice, because I mentioned earlier that in the past I had sometimes noticed some sensitivity, pain in a certain part of my ear.
Yeah.
And now thinking about it in context of that chart, when that used to happen, I was experiencing, this was a few years back, I was experiencing chronic shoulder injury.
Oh, really?
And I couldn't really solve the shoulder injury constantly happening. And it was in the spot indicated to the shoulder by that chart.
Really?
And I dealt with all that through using sound and tuning forks. And that's what even got me into being a practitioner of the modality, because it worked for me.
Oh,
but
awesome.
It's really cool to see that sort of validation in this chart of the ear. Really, really cool stuff.
Confirmation right there.
Yeah.
Oh, can I show just one more thing before we take this down?
Definitely.
So there's one more thing that's that's fascinating about this whole process of auricular, and that is that you see there are vitamin points here. So there's vitamin B12, folic acid, B5, etc. All these vitamin points, right? So these are indicator points actually for vitamin deficiency. And so we can also determine what vitamins a person is deficient in. And not only that, but we can also link those deficiencies to old traumas. And so sometimes what happens is there's a trauma that happens and there's a part of the nervous system acts as if it's still happening, and it's draining energy and nutrients from the body. And it links on to a particular vitamin usually. And so a particular trauma, say from when you were 5 years old, that's still alive in you somehow, is actually could be draining your vitamin B12. And for that person, no matter how many times they get a vitamin B12 shot, they still are deficient in it. And that's because until we locate and identify and treat that particular trauma, the vitamin B12 will not be able to be fully absorbed in the body. And so this is another element that I think is kind of neat in this.
Yeah, I was wondering why there's vitamins listed there, and that's cool. So it can show you where there may be nutritional deficiencies as well.
Yeah.
And what doesn't it have?
Yeah, I haven't thought of anything yet.
Something, it's tough to decide what to try to fit into the free part, but I think in the spirit of giving people the most hope and optimism possible, maybe we can talk a bit about hearing itself or hearing loss. Is that something that's part of your field? And are there things that we could say that are beyond what maybe the mainstream would think in terms of what's possible for restoration or healing?
So what I'll say about that is that even though I use the ear as a microsystem, when it comes to the function of the inner ear, I don't necessarily deal with that any more than I would dysfunction of any other part of the body. Similar to like a reflexologist wouldn't necessarily specialize in plantar fasciitis, for example, right?
Makes sense.
And so, yeah, so specifically, no, but I do work a lot with people with tinnitus, for example, but not because it's an ear thing, because it's a deep nervous system thing, and so I do work with hearing stuff, but not because I work with the ear necessarily, which can be a little confusing.
Sure. And, that makes perfect sense to me. So no disappointment there. But I will say, let's jump into the tinnitus question. I agree that it's more energetic than is typically comprehended. In my experience, it tends to correlate more to third eye energy than anything else.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I'd love to know what maybe you've, what you found out about it. I've had particular success with a few clients that came to me with that by dealing with stuck energy at the third eye level. What about you?
Awesome. Yeah. So from my perspective, I've seen, so first physiologically, I feel like a lot of times there is an element that's happening that is based on the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve it's a kind of a hot topic, but I like to think of the vagus nerve as something that informs our body about how safe we are. And so when we have trauma, when we have whether it's emotional or physical, then our vagus nerve is now saying to our body all the time, "Oh, you're not safe. You have to defend yourself." And the tinnitus sometimes can be worsened or in part caused by this feeling of not being safe. And so energetically, a lot of times what I'll ask people is there something that you're not willing to hear, willing to not hear as in always with your inner ears, but hear as in absorb? Is there information you're not willing to accept? Is there, are there things? And a lot of people don't, if that's the case, they don't know about it. But now you can use some of those emotional points that you were seeing on the chart, and we can link them to the inner ear, to points on the vagus nerve as well. We can link those points and say, oh, maybe there's a resentment element here. Maybe there's a distrust element here, and sort of start to investigate what the picture looks like for them from an emotional perspective as well. It's always very complex, but basically I'll say that whether I'm dealing with tinnitus or chronic pain or migraines or anything at all, I always will go looking for old traumas, what I call blockages to healing. And because no matter what the symptoms are, no matter what the condition is, they're usually, if it's chronic, there's usually something underneath it that's maintaining it that is trauma related to some degree. And so what auricular medicine really specializes in is being able to locate and prioritize that trauma, and then find out all kinds of information about what's connected to that particular event. Or if it's not an event, it could have been a chronic inflammation for a long time. It could have been verbal abuse for a long time. It could have been many things. But sometimes it is attached to a particular age or a particular body part, So clearing that will eventually then be part of the solution for tinnitus as well. Yeah.
That totally jives with my experience on it. The particular tendency of the third eye that relates to tinnitus is more of a PTSD type thing, like you're saying. It deals with energetically the ability to think future oriented and the ability to recall things from the past. It's like your imagination, beyond just creatively speaking, is able to frame things forward and backward. And tinnitus tends to be more of a problem related to things from the past, in my experience, for sure.
Yeah,
so,
I agree.
And so there's stuck energy that is actually in your biofield off the head level. So that ringing in your ear or is like symbolic of the dampening of information coming into you because there's this buffer. But hey, at this point, this is all really good stuff. But at this point, I think we should definitely have some space to talk about your teaching offerings and what people can find online from you or your private practice. Can you tell people about that stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have a lot going on right now, actually, in my life. I live in a small town in Nova Scotia, and I have a small clinical practice here. But my fiance and I have decided it was just this amazing opportunity that just sort of was handed to us by the universe. And we are actually leaving Nova Scotia for 1 year, and we're going to this beautiful retreat villa of these beautiful hand-built domes in the jungle of on the Caribbean coast of Mexico, close to Tulum. So, and because what we realized was, one thing that we really want to be able to do is we want to help people in an immersive way, because seeing people once every week, once every 2 weeks, you can make a change, but we really have dreamt of really helping people immerse into a healing experience. And so now this opportunity has come up. And so we're going to be shifting towards this property outside of Tulum, Mexico, starting in September. And we're going to be holding healing retreats that are going to be all kinds of different subjects, different topics. But, one of them, for example, is a 30-day immersion for people with chronic pain and trauma. And we're going to be using Auricular, among many other modalities, as well as mindfulness and these kinds of things. So from a practice perspective, this is what my practice is shifting into right now, which is very exciting for us. And so I'll certainly share the website for those retreats and that space, that beautiful healing space as well, that you could just come. If you're in Tulum, just come and stay with us. It's on Airbnb too. So that's what we're doing, kind of a clinic side of things. In terms of teaching, I'm still going to be doing a whole lot of live courses. And in fact, my next one is going to be in Halifax just this weekend coming. And I'm also going to be doing a bunch of courses in Europe in September, everything ranging from a full level 1 program to a 2-day protocol-based course. And I'm going to be doing a laser course in Portugal. And so a lot of really amazing things happening in Europe. But really what I'm going to focus on after I get back is doing courses at this property in Tulum, Mexico. So if you feel like you want to come and get some treatment or learn how to do this, and you feel like in the winter you need a break from the north, depending on maybe if you live in Arizona, that's not so much the case, but I welcome you to come and join us there. So I have a website for my auricular teaching, that is instituteofauricular.com. And I have a website for the retreat center, which is nahku.com. And so, but we'll post those as well for you to find. So lots of exciting things. And I welcome you to take part in whatever way you feel like you might want to.
Beautiful, man. You got a lot going on. You're very well spoken. This has been a fascinating first hour. Still a lot of ground to cover in the part 2. Definitely talking more about the various modalities that you bring to the table, because it sounds like the ear stuff, while there is therapeutic aspects to working with the ear, a lot of it is diagnostic that can then be accessed through many other different ways of healing the body. Absolutely. Psychosomatic therapy is really cool. And then I got to ask about lasers. So we'll converge on the Plus extension, but you got any closing thoughts for the free audience before we mosey on over?
Oh, I just so appreciate anybody that was that wanted to come and hear about Auricular. I really hope that you either learn how to do some of this, even if it's just on your own ear. I encourage you just to play around. You can't really hurt yourself by playing around with your ear, and you might be surprised of what you can do. And thank you so much for joining and hearing this new information.
Thank you, Dave. This is exciting stuff, and we'll see everybody on the other side. All right, everybody. Thanks for being here. What a uniquely fascinating episode that was. Have you ever thought about the auricular medicine, the fractal of the ear, the magic in the ear, the ways you can diagnose and influence internal body parts and systems with the ear? It makes sense. There's lots of parts of the body that are a fractal of the whole, and the body itself is a fractal of the whole. So it's fractals inside of fractals, of course. I love any content like that. And I have to talk about it. I'll get to it later, but how bizarre that this episode had already been recorded and on my mind and planned for release here on this Monday of July 15th. And then the earshot heard around the world occurs. I got to talk about that, but we'll get there. First of all, if you are at all excited about this episode and want more, you can get the Plus extension, the second half with Dave, Maybee, and myself on my Patreon or my YouTube channel membership, or of course, Rockfin. All of that's going to be linked in the show notes, as well as several links that Dave asked me to include, such as the retreat center he's going to be at for like a year, and the auricular medicine website itself, where you can get a session as a client or receive some training on how you could possibly fold this knowledge into your holistic practice. So what's in the Plus extension? Well, we discuss why holistic healing requires and inspires major lifestyle shifts and what that looks like, what separates real holistic health from a materialist or green allopathy model. He talked about auricular success stories, like a woman who restored her fertility and a case that she'd been told that it was not possible by the doctors. We discussed the convergence of auricular medicine and psychology, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR, Dave's own innovations of auricular methods for trauma resolution. We had a deep contemplation on how does memory work really? Where is memory stored? What does memory mean? How does it work? And then, last but not least, the ear as a map of ourself in the womb. And yeah, a map of ourself in the womb, as in the ear maps to a baby in the fetal position, like you would be in the womb. That is interesting. That's where this map of correspondences, I guess, comes from. And then we talked about lasers, but for health lasers. So I liked how that came into play. The light therapy question was part of the dental shaman's conversation too. Very cool stuff. I heard this Steiner quote the other day where he says, consider the following case. Someone is traveling by railway. His mind is busy with one thought. Suddenly his thought diverges. He recollects an experience that befell him years ago and interweaves it with his present thought. He did not notice that in looking through the window, he had caught sight of a person who resembled another, intimately connected with the recollected experience. He remains conscious not of what he saw, but of the effect it produced, and thus believes that it all came to him of its own accord. How much of life occurs in such a way? How great is the part played in our life by things we hear and learn without our consciously realizing the connection? Someone, for instance, cannot bear a certain color, but does not realize that this is due to the fact that the schoolmaster who used to worry him many years ago wore a coat of that color. Innumerable illusions are based upon such associations. Many things leave their mark upon the soul, while remaining outside the pale of consciousness. Now, in context with that recent, whether we want to call it a psyop or a false flag or a legit collective trauma, the assassination attempt, I want to bring everybody's mind back to one of the most significant collective traumas that's ever occurred in human history, possibly the most, and of course that's 9/11. I had a client just the other day for a tuning session where we found 9/11. Okay, so let me just back up. I hit this spot in her energy field that was in the root chakra. It was in the back left quadrant. And that part of the biofield deals with things that we think about or that we want to do, but that we don't take action on or we feel like we can't. And so I'm like, what at the age of 11 did you have a lot of fear associated with something you wanted to do or change, but you felt like you couldn't do or change it, or something you felt like you couldn't do or didn't want to do? I know that's a lot of generalizations, right? It's maybe not exactly how it went down in the session, but it turned out that this client, her 11th birthday was 9/11/2001. And her experience of that was to wish that she could change her birthday, wish that her birthday wasn't on that day, of course, like any 11-year-old might. You know, you're getting on the school bus thinking, today's the best day for me. Everything's going my way. Oh, yeah. And then all of that shenanigans goes down, and all of a sudden the other kids are like, no one cares about your birthday. Planes just hit the 2 towers. And when things like that happen, from a child's mind perspective, you can't help but feel like it's your fault somehow. And that's what the association was for this person I was working with. And the connection in the, related to how Steiner just talked about these unconscious connections and associations, the connection that was made from that trauma for her was to feel a strong aversion for the rest of her life towards being recognized or given gifts or her own birthday, any kind of limelight where there's like accolades or credit or just like love being shown to her was like, yeah, I can't do that. I don't want that. And so we undid those associations. And, okay, when I talk about stock energy in the biofield, maybe it's not 100% of the time that she would reject recognition, but it's an inhibition towards the full acceptance of that like abundant, loving witness that we get usually at least once a year, if not more often than that. And so again, and going back to the Trump thing, I'm not going to tell you guys what to think. I don't know what to think, right? It's not typically my place to even bring up political stuff. I don't consider myself for or against political candidates per se. I will, of course, admit that I'd rather hang out with the Trump tribe than the lefties at this point. And for a long time, one side is definitely more fun and less psychotic, typically. But you got to look at this thing from the big picture perspective, which is the constant pendulum swing from right to left of which side has the currency of victimhood and persecution built up, saved up enough that they become the empowered side. And I think that's what we're getting right now is the victim currency, victim becomes perpetrator of the left is swinging the other way. They're losing their mandate from heaven, metaphorically speaking. And now, what's a better story of the persecuted victim hero than a Hollywood movie style pro wrestling level grazing the ear sniper assassination attempt? And I really maybe jumped to the conclusion early on when it happened that it was fake or that it was staged. I'm not ruling out that that's possible. And even false flags can occur with actual collateral damage taking place, I guess. I don't know. I've never been there. I've only ever received the information about these type of events from the screen or from the history books, right? But it is worth considering that Trump has been a pro wrestler, that there are such a thing as blood packs, that you could even potentially fake the death of someone in a crowd. I don't know. But when it makes people feel like they're living inside a movie when something like this happens. But the astrologers that I really trust, I'm more of a scholarly astrologer, not a practicing one. So I don't consider myself qualified to make these kind of judgment calls, but astrologers that I really do trust their input, they are looking at the transits for DJT and saying, this looks like it was a real thing. This looks totally real from that perspective. And I don't know. I'm not saying I know. I just think to reiterate that it's super bizarre, and maybe just a sign of being tapped in to whatever the collective flow state of consciousness is on, that I'm having this ear conversation come out while everybody's flipping out about the ear that got grazed. It's so weird, super weird. But Kaylee Burkana, my favorite friend astrologer, I would say, I don't know, that's kind of a lot to say. I have a lot of astrologer friends. I don't want to put one on a pedestal and above others, but she's great. She's up there. You know, if they're all tied, is my favorite. Asked her a little bit about the significance of what I think to be the most interesting thing going on in the sky clock, which is the conjunction of Mars and Uranus and Algol. Now, Algol, if I'm not mistaken, is fixed star that is part of the Perseus constellation. It's like Medusa's head or Medusa's eye. So and it's a malefic star. So there's your headshot, potentially, something like that. I asked her about that conjunction and what she thinks. And she mentioned that the conjunction is right over Trump's MC. He's in his 7th house year. I'm just reading from what she said to me. Ruled by Saturn. His Saturn is in his 12th house, which is where his sun's at right now because he's Leo rising. And so it has to do with having open enemies that are hiding to actively undermine him. The conjunction squared is Mars at 26 degree Leo in the 1st house, which she says that literally spells out the possibility of a radical element causing injury and harm to him in a public setting. It couldn't be more literal astrology. She says people immediately jumping to conclusions of it being staged is a mistake, in her opinion. She said a lot of interesting stuff. Also, like how Trump's natal Venus was transiting the Venus in his 1st house, which could be protection from the goddess somehow, aka the near miss. Wasn't it a lady in the crowd that was the one that allegedly got actually killed? Is that the goddess taking the hit for him? There was even like a female bodyguard right up front and center of the camera when they shuffle him off the stage, and he's like, my shoes. Kaylee's like, damn right he cares about his shoes. He's a Leo rising. I think that all that is fascinating, but what's most important, rather than it being real or not, what really happened, is how events like this can just sort of pry open vulnerabilities in our energy field. Maybe even for some of us, just strip our boundaries between ourselves and the collective completely away. And all of a sudden, we went from a normal Saturday to being on this crazy, dramatic ride of ups and downs and following the event and waiting for the next update and listening to live streamers talk shit that they don't know one way or the other. And maybe I'm one of those guys that talks shit and I don't know one way or the other, but I'm not pretending to know. I did kind of jump to the conclusion that it was staged, though, because the bodyguards that come on to the stage with him after the shots are no longer happening, they all looked like jocks in high school that got thrown onto the theater stage and had never taken theater class. I don't know. Just wasn't very believable looking. These things can be faked. What can't be faked? Even in public, to be made to look like somebody really got shot, blood packs and everything. Who knows? I'm not making any claims. I'm just saying, have a critical mind, and most of all, pay attention to your own boundaries. Do what you can to shore up your personal coherence. Get grounded. Get in some natural flowing water, or hug a tree, or just visualize the strengthening of your boundaries, and pay attention for if you feel yourself getting swept away in the energetic current of what the collective is doing with this, because it is Uranus with Mars over this malefic Algol. I won't pretend to be able to tell you everything that means, but it does seem like that would inspire a lot of negative, aggressive influence from the collective. That Uranus being the collective, Mars being the aggression, Algol being the malefic nature of it. Who knows? All very interesting. And I feel like I should mention again just what a great conversation it was with Dave Maybee, back to the whole reason you guys are here listening to the show. And I hope you pursue this auricular medicine. Oh, yeah. And the other thing I wanted to say about it is now that I've had this talk with Dave and I know a little bit of the different points of the ear and their significance, I'm like, so the top of the ear is what got hit? That's like this histamine response center. I know fairly well that that's what the top of the ear has going on, because since I talked to Dave, I've been using it for that. Maybe I get a little sniffle reaction to some sage smoke or, whatever the case may be, feeling like a little congestion or a sneeze coming on, and you massage the top of your ear, just like kind of squeeze it and massage it, and all that just gets better right away. So does the whole event of Orange Man getting the top of his ear shot off, if that's what happened, or just symbolically happened, represent a type of collective allergic reaction to, I don't know what, maybe leftism? Who knows? Cool stuff to consider. Everything happens the way it's supposed to, so no reason to be overly worried about it. Don't forget all the ways you can support the show. Thanks for tuning in. Get in the show notes, the episode description. Get yourself some Tippecanoe herbs. Coupon code InnerVerse. Can't recommend that stuff more highly. Actually, try buying some clove from Kyle. I know that's not the most big ticket item, so pick up a tincture or something while you're there too. There's a lot of good ones, but like I need to re-up on the sleep aid tincture. Although I haven't had it for a little while, and I've noticed the magic bullet for me to get good night's sleep that was a missing part of my equation until the last couple of weeks when I finally started doing it and realized how importantly helpful it was. It's nettle leaf tea. If I do that an hour or two before bed, so far it's a 100% record of getting a good night's sleep. And I'll be honest, I was for a good many months probably only feeling well rested half the time. And I guess it had something to do with like a sort of agitated state my body would get into without going into further detail. And I'm not even entirely sure where that's coming from, but just kind of some like pent up physical agitation. It's nettle stuff. Boom. Evens all that out. I don't wake up in the middle of the night like I had been. Feel well rested. Don't wake up earlier than I need to. So it's a pretty helpful plant for yours truly. So if you're learning about herbalism or want to just try out some tinctures that are accurately named and described that might help you with certain things in your health that you feel like you could use a boost on, Kyle's stuff at Tippecanoe is amazing. All of it. Everything I've ever tried from there. Absolutely love it. I'm also really into the Lotus Way flower elixirs, many different kinds that Katie Hess sent me so graciously, and I've been using all of them. Great stuff. And the Mind Calm Mind, whatever. I've been doing that one before bed too. I'm sure that has something to do with the gradual improvement of my restfulness. I think with the flower elixirs, it's not as much like you're taking a dose and getting an immediate strong effect like you might expect with other kinds of medicine, but you're using it regularly and it's a cumulative energetic buildup over the whole length of time you're taking it that extends into the future. That's my opinion. I'm not a doctor. But of course, you can get a biofield tuning with yours truly. Let's clear up your 9/11 drama. And thank you to the wonderful new friend that had a session with me where we found that and many other helpful connections to dispel associations, to disassociate from freedom, restored to personality and personal energy. It's great stuff. It's great stuff. You never know what's right under your nose until you get a biofield tuning and realize, oh, that's how that's been affecting me. Oh, that's a choice I didn't realize I had about who I am. Good stuff. All right. This has been a long outro. I got to go. Thanks for tuning in. Check out the Auricular Medicine website of Dave Maybee and stay tuned for kind of a gear shift in topics that we've got coming up on the rest of July and early August. Really cool gear shift. So if all this holistic health gravy is just too much and you're ready for something else, well, we're changing it up soon. Okay. Much love, everybody. Bye-bye.